Hello and welcome to Katie Pavlich Tonight. Breaking this evening, dramatic new video from the third assassination attempt on President Trump. And it shows the attempted assassin, Cole Allen, bolting past a security checkpoint and firing his 12-gauge shotgun at a Secret Service agent from point-blank range. It also shows Allen stalking the Washington Hilton hallways the day before the assassination attempt. NewsNation White House correspondent Kelly Meyer joins us now to break down the footage. Kelly, what did we see with this new footage tonight?
So there's been this debate, in Washington about whether or not this was friendly fire or not. And this video the Justice Department put out tonight really shows that this suspected gunman, Cole Allen, fired at one of those officers, and then, continued to keep running through and then eventually was taken down before, just steps away from where we were, as well as members of the Trump administration and the president, the vice president themselves. This video actually shows, it runs 6 minutes long, and it shows him there going through the gym. He's kind of checking it out. And some of this was the night before. So he checked in the day before, goes through, and then you could kind of see him walking through the hallway, even seeming to get a sense of walking back and forth, counting the doors, coming back through, and then you fast forward and show the next night, this is still Friday here, he's walking through again, and then Saturday in the coat there, then runs through, and they kind of speed it up there to show you him firing at that officer. So it really just shows, and this comes after we just saw him in court today. He's agreed to remain in custody. He's going to be in 24-hour lockdown in this safe cell. But it was interesting, they were trying to paint him as this devout Christian, a family man, in court today. But of course, we know that there was that selfie of him right before he did this with all the weapons on him. And we know that in his manifesto, in his letter to family and friends, he said he was targeting members of the administration. So it'll be interesting to see this play out. But that was the latest piece that we got from the Justice Department tonight.
Yeah, looking at the video, you see an officer with the canine looking at him as he goes into the room. There was kind of an interaction, and then he walked away, and then he made his move. Also interesting to see them taking the magnetometers down at the time that he was running in. And also the timing was President Trump was then seated. So he waited until everyone was in the room to make his move. So definitely more questions about this scene and what happened. Kelly Meyer, great to see you. Thanks for breaking it down for us. See you soon. All right, well, the latest nationwide anti-Trump protest is scheduled for tomorrow, May Day, and organizers are demanding no work, no school, and no shopping. They're calling for this economic disruption to disengage from the system that isn't working for Americans and is just propping up Trump's regime. But this system, they decry, employs tens of millions of American workers, invests in our communities, and pays billions in taxes that support public services that make everyday American lives better. This day of economic disruption is more likely to hurt workers than the people and companies who employ them. If employees don't work, they lose out on income. And if people don't shop, businesses have less to pay their employees. And if students aren't in school, they lose out on lessons and community. But conveniently, they're freed up to join May Day protests. The consequences of the left's tax the rich agenda further hurt working Americans by driving investment jobs and tax revenues away. And now it's the likes of New York City Mayor Mamdani saying Mayday as their economies sink into a pit they dug for themselves.
New York City faces a budget crisis of a historic magnitude. We cannot close this deficit with savings alone. We need new revenue.
And despite New York's woes, other progressives aren't changing tact. Like Mamdani, she won't be laughing once she too runs out of money. Joining us now is former Bernie Sanders campaign advisor Tezlyn Figaro, along with Newsweek senior editor-at-large and Article 3 Project senior counsel Josh Hammer. Great to see you both. Thanks so much for being here. So Tezlyn, let's start with you. In just the first 6 months since taking office, Mayor Mamdani is proving Margaret Thatcher, someone who I love, that the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. So if you're running the rich who pay the majority of the taxes out of town, how do you expect to pay for things like free buses, free healthcare, and schools?
Well, we'll see. Mamdani's actually doing pretty good. From what I'm understanding, the folks are loving what he's doing as far as childcare is concerned and how he's been able to listen to constituents. So we'll see. I know a lot of people wanted him to be set up to fail. And I know what he's asked has been impossible, but looks like he's getting a lot of support from the governor and from his constituents.
Okay, but Josh, he stood up and said that we have no money left. I mean, if you don't have money to pay for these free services, people are going to get pretty upset pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm not really sure exactly what polls my interlocutor is looking at, or what headlines, frankly, she's looking at. So actually, just this week, there was Katie, there was literally actually a live experiment of Zohar Mamdani's popularity that just happened 2 nights ago in New York City. Mamdani actually handpicked a DSA-endorsed socialist candidate running in Greenwich Village to be on the city council, and his handpicked candidate lost by roughly 20 points. So he's been emphatically rebuked in his first ever endorsement test. The polls also show actually that he's had a pretty precipitous decline among both Hispanic and Black support there in New York City. He's begging Kathy Hochul for money. They have the budget that's inflated. I mean, Katie, I live in Florida. New York City's citywide budget is very similar to our entire statewide budget here in the nation's third largest state. The difference, of course, is that here in Florida, we have a rainy day fund. In New York City, Mamdani is basically begging Kathy Hochul for some chump change.
Oh, he's also said they're willing to raid the, quote, rainy day fund to make sure that people have free everything, which, of course, you know is not free. But Tezlyn, like places in New York, Seattle, for example, coast to coast, these leaders like Mamdani say they want to levy these massive taxes on, they call it the ultra wealthy, but we've had people on this show who are in the middle class who maybe were able to buy and purchase a home and now they rent it out for extra cash, but they're not rich. They're barely making it in New York City. So I'm just curious where all these people who think that things are going to be free, where they think the tax base is going to come from once the billionaires are no longer paying for the taxes inside of these cities.
Well, are you talking about New York or are we talking about Seattle?
We're talking about both. They got the same policies in both places.
Okay, well, two different mayors. Well, one thing we do know about both places is the voters have decided to put both these mayors in. When you look at the overwhelming voters that voted for Mamdani, the almost 50% or over 50% that voted for the Seattle mayor, this is what they've asked for. So if they're saying that, they want to be able to tax the rich, and if they don't want the rich to continue to stay there, then they certainly can go to Florida or any other state over there. I'm sure they'd be welcome with open arms. But let's just see how it works out. The bottom line is, even with the way things are now, the economy is tanking. People are hurting on every level. People are losing their health care or have lost their health care. They've lost their jobs. Inflation is up. It's through the roof. Gas is through the roof. So it looks like socialism, and I'm not a socialist, by the way, but it looks like socialism might be the way to go, because people won't have any other choice but to depend on the government safety net. So the way things are looking now, I don't know if the argument is on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, well, government equals taxpayers, so someone is going to end up paying for it. But Josh, I want to get to the midterm elections here. Democratic Governor Janet Mills has ended her campaign for U.S. Senate in Maine, which means that the path for Graham Planter to clinch the nomination and face incumbent Republican Susan Collins in November is wide open. Why is it that Democrats are celebrating this candidate who has a Nazi tattoo to represent their party?
Well, Katie, as you and I both know, the Democratic Party now stands for the modern-day Nazis of Hamas. I mean, they were the ones who have been offering all sorts of apologia. Zohar Mamdani is actually a perfect example. I mean, he's exactly the breed, the new breed of Democrat who openly sides with the enemies of America, the enemies of Israel, the enemies of Judeo-Christian civilization over Western civilization. Mamdani actually was tweeting about the apartheid in Gaza before the Israeli tanks even went in after October 7, 2023. Heck, Hassan Piker, whom Mamdani recently appeared with, has doubled down over the past week and said that he will choose Hamas over Israel 1,000 times out of 1,000. So the Democratic Party has a massive, massive problem, frankly, when it comes to a lot of these issues. And unfortunately, I'm the least bit surprised that their presumptive nominee up in Maine has a literal Nazi tattoo. Maine is a pretty moderate state, Katie. Susan Collins is the quintessential moderate Republican. I would not want to bet against Susan Collins right now. I predict that she's probably going to win this race against Graham Planter.
Yeah, Tezlyn, I mean, this is a seat that Democrats have really tried to take over the years. Susan Collins always has a very difficult re-election campaign. But is this guy really the one to get it done, especially since there's going to be so much focus nationally on this Senate race with the control of the Senate on the line?
But, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be able to want to get it done or not. But I do know one thing that needs to get done. Democrats need the type of candidates that are willing to fight again for the 1965 Voting Rights Act that just got pushed back and weakened due to Section 2. So when we start talking about tattoos and who's the Nazis and who's not, let's look at how Black voters were just basically ignored in Louisiana. So right now, what I think the Democrat Party needs to be focusing on is getting candidates all up and down the ballot in all states, and particularly southern states, that can help help them swing the House and the Senate. I do believe Democrats will be winning by a landslide, even by default, at the very least. But based on how things are going, like I said earlier, Democrats are looking for candidates to put them in position, and it looks like Republicans are falling off one by one.
All right, Josh, so it's fine to be a Democrat with a Nazi tattoo so long as you can gain power for the Democratic Party. But let's go over to Nevada for a second. Democratic candidate for Attorney General Zach Koenig released this ad yesterday. Take a listen.
With Donald Trump, there's a new fight every day.
I can do anything I want.
He's threatening to rig our elections. He's sending in masked ICE agents, letting big banks screw Nevadans out of their money and their homes, and driving up costs with illegal tariffs.
So this ad shows the candidates bashing the head of Donald Trump into a slot machine, essentially, in Las Vegas, just days after the president was almost assassinated for a third time.
Yeah, probably not the most tactful thing to do in this particularly fraught and heated moment. I'm actually reminded also of a very similar thing that happened actually in Nevada's neighboring state, the state of California. So it was less than 48 hours after the would-be assassin Saturday evening in Washington, D.C. Katie Porter, who's one of the remaining candidates there out for the California gubernatorial election, she sends out a fundraising email with the title F Trump. She actually spelled the word. I obviously won't say it here on cable television. But
Thank
the
you for
whole
that.
email,
We appreciate it.
you bet. But the whole email was just dripping with this four-letter word and just truly vile, rancid, fetid stuff. You know, Katie, this happens time and time again. After Butler, Pennsylvania, after West Palm Beach, Florida, after the Charlie Kirk assassination, the left says for a 24 to 48-hour period at the most, that they will tone down the rhetoric, and then we're right back to where we start all over again. And frankly, unless and until this vicious, toxic cycle changes, which unfortunately I'm not sure when will happen or how it will happen, frankly, but unless and until that changes, Katie, I deeply fear that the same thing will just happen over and over and over again.
Well, I'm happy that you both came on tonight for a civil discussion. So, Tezlyn, Josh Hammer, great to see you both. Thank you very much for being here. See you soon.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. All right, moving on to Iran, where we're still waiting for a breakthrough for our next round of negotiations. President Trump reportedly received a briefing today on new options for military action that could possibly break that stalemate. That comes amid reports that our military is considering sending long-range hypersonic missiles to the Middle East for the first time.
Iran is dying to make a deal. I can only tell you that. They want to have a nuclear weapon. You can't let them have a nuclear weapon. They are in very bad shape. They've got nothing going, including leadership. I mean, you know, their leader's a gun.
On the Iranian side, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, or at least someone speaking on his behalf, said that Iran will protect its nuclear and missile capabilities as a national asset. He also posted that the only place Americans belong in the Persian Gulf is at the bottom of the waters. He also called America the Great Satan, right on brand for the regime. Joining us now is Reza Faharan, star of The Shahs of Sunset and the author of the new book, Memoirs of a Gay Shah, out now. Reza, great to see you. Of course, there's the military aspect of this. The president reportedly asking for additional options against Iran as they refuse to give up the nuclear program. We have 3 aircraft carriers in the Middle East, hundreds of aircraft, many ships, 15,000 Marines. But I want to start with you on this aspect of it, the human aspect of it. There was this heart-wrenching video that was recently released showing a group of defiant Iranian protesters singing one time before they were hanged by the regime for their protest. Reza, it's difficult to watch that video knowing what's about to happen to those men. You were born in Iran, you know people who still live there. You were in America when the revolution broke out. By, you know, the grace of God, you still were here and not in the middle of it. How does watching a video like that make you feel?
Heartbreaking. I'm doing everything I can to hold the tears back, and I pray for their families and their loved ones, and it's devastating. And it just makes me feel like we need to finish the job in Iran. Leaving these terrorists in control of that country will be the biggest mistake, because now they are furious. We've killed the original Khamenei. God knows if Mojtaba is still alive, but if these people remain in power, can you imagine, Katie, what they are going to do to the population once we're done with the conflict in Iran? I really pray that there is regime change and the people of Iran are free from these radical terrorists.
Yeah, and the radical terrorists who have killed a lot of Americans along the way as well. President Trump spoke about this today, about those protesters who have been killed in Iran so far, tens of thousands of them. Take a listen.
They killed 42,000 people. So when you say about, say that I do the same, I don't do the same. I'm trying to save that country in a certain way. And nobody's ever seen that. Think of it. They killed 42,000 innocent, not weapon-carrying people for protesting. 42,000. And the number they say is a lot higher than that.
What is your response to his message, and do you read into anything that he may be saying there?
I am just very grateful that there's someone acknowledging that 42,000 people were killed in the span of just a couple of days. But Katie, if you add up the human rights violations that these terrorists have committed against their own people since 1975, can you imagine how many people they have killed? It's time for them to go, and I'm just very grateful that someone is acknowledging what the terrorists are doing, and they're actually doing something about it, finally.
So I mentioned at the top that the president is reportedly receiving briefings. We know, of course, he gets briefed every day, but new additional briefings about what we could do in the Middle East against Iran now that they're refusing to give up their nuclear program. He's obviously considering additional military options. Is that something that you support? And you have people in Iran. What are you hearing from them about what they would like to happen moving forward?
I have friends and family that I've spoken to Iran a short while ago, and they are petrified that this regime will stay in power and the revenge that they'll take out on their own people because of what America and Israel have done to them thus far. So obviously, I don't want any human casualties. I don't want to lose any American service members. I don't want any civilians in Iran to die. But this terror regime is a threat to the world. They've used the resources of the country for the past almost 50 years to fund proxy terror and terror on a global level. The Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah. And imagine what will happen in the Middle East if 90 million people all of a sudden are free and aren't chanting death to America because the government is forcing them to. It'll change the landscape in the Middle East. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Afghanistan. And the people have been praying to be liberated.
Absolutely. It would be a completely different place. Reza Farahhan, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, well, coming up, there's something really strange happening at Area 51 right now. Details when we come back. Plus, a failed Obama-era gun-running scheme not only armed the cartels, it led to the murder of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, among others. And today, the Trump administration took action to make sure it never happens again. We'll tell you about it up next. Welcome back. Well, some much-needed reforms were announced by the Department of Justice and Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives this week. And no, not the convenience store. I'm talking about the federal agency. The reforms are aimed at allowing the ATF to focus on criminals rather than inadvertent mistakes by otherwise responsible gun owners or dealerships. Here's Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche on the rollback.
We're repealing rules that went beyond what the law allows. We are cutting unnecessary red tape, and we are replacing confusion with clear, straightforward language so that everyday Americans don't need a law degree just to understand their rights.
Hopefully, this means the days of the ATF playing fast and loose with the law and Americans' rights are over. Anyone saying changes are unnecessary haven't been paying attention. Remember when ATF agents lost track of dozens of their own government-issued guns, including forgetting them in bathroom stalls, at a hospital, outside a movie theater, and on a plane? One found that the ATF lost or had its weapons stolen more often than any other federal law enforcement agency. They also just lost a machine gun or two during undercover operations in our streets. The ATF was also caught using rogue tactics, such as recruiting mentally disabled men to promote phony businesses and recruit illegal firearm purchasers, or gave underage kids alcohol or marijuana for operations. Not to mention baiting a mentally disabled man into getting a squid tattoo on his neck. And who could forget the agency's bloody Fast and Furious scandal and the cover-up? No, not the movie. This was when the ATF allowed thousands of firearms to be purchased by known criminals and taken to Mexico, arming the very narco-terrorist cartels they claimed to be stopping. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people would be killed by terrorists using these firearms, including U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. And perhaps now, instead of going after law-abiding firearm owners, the ATF can get its own house in order and focus on stopping actual criminals. Let's bring in the host of the 10-Minute Drill podcast, Matt Whitlock, and BearingArms.com editor Cam Edwards. Gentlemen, great to see you tonight. Thanks so much for being here. So, Cam, first to you. These are 34 proposed refiner rules that have been rolled back. These are mostly Biden-era regulations. Can you tell us, in a summary, what that is going to mean, what the most significant ones are, and why it's important?
Yeah, I mean, we are talking about a lot of rule changes, right? So they're rolling back the Biden-era rule that treated all brace-equipped pistols as if they were short-barreled rifles. They're rolling back, and this is a really important one, a rule that the Biden administration put in place that basically treated every gun owner who offered a firearm from their own collection for sale as an unlicensed gun dealer. This was Biden's attempt to impose universal background checks without a vote by Congress. And in doing so, they went beyond what Congress actually said in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. They redefined who was engaged in the business of dealing firearms. And even before the ATF announced this rule change yesterday, a federal judge in Alabama had said that the ATF overstepped its authority by putting this rule in place. So it's really important that the ATF is now recognizing this, and the DOJ is recognizing this. There are a number of rules that I think are going to benefit the firearms industry, a number of rules that are going to benefit gun owners. There are a couple of things that, Second Amendment groups like Gun Owners of America still have some concerns about. Records retention, for example, for 20 to 30 years is too long for a lot of Second Amendment groups. But, I think overall, what we know, at least in the summaries that have been released, is that this really is, I think, a big day for ATF reform.
Yeah, we'll have to watch what the concerns are and follow up with that. ATF was going after gun dealerships for basic paperwork errors, mistakes that were made rather than things they were doing nefariously or criminally. But Matt, of course, the ATF is the poster child for what goes wrong when rules surrounding a constitutional right are just changed by unelected bureaucrats, not based on the law. I love that Todd Blanche said you shouldn't have a law degree to understand what your rights are.
That's what's so important. I loved Cam's summary. I thought he explained perfectly, because what we've seen for the last couple decades with ATF, particularly under Democrat administrations, is they play pretty fast and loose with the law because their goal is overall to support the larger Democrat objective of restricting Second Amendment rights through any means possible. And when you get into things like those clerical errors that they tried to clamp down on, it reminds you again that their largest objective is simply to take all guns off the street through any means possible, making it more difficult to own them, making it more difficult to sell them, to transfer them. And it really, at the end of the day, impacts law-abiding gun owners more than anything. So this is about restoring the ATF to their core mission and protecting the rights of actual law-abiding gun owners.
Yeah, it's about time. Cam, you, of course, watched the reaction to all things Second Amendment related, but specifically you've written a number of pieces about the left's reaction to these exact changes. What are you hearing about what they're saying?
Well, as you can imagine, they're not very happy about this, right? They're making some outlandish claims that this is going to, aid violent felons in acquiring firearms, that it's going to make the country less safe. But they're not acknowledging the fact that the engaged in the business rule had already been subject to an injunction, right? That it wasn't being enforced, it was not in place. That the Trump administration had decided to stop defending this. You talked about the efforts to go after gun stores. So this is one of the other rule changes here, right? The ATF wants to redefine what willful means to the ATF. And their new definition is that gun store owners have to know that they're violating the law. That's willful, right? Under the Biden administration, a simple paperwork mistake counted as a willful violation and could lead to a FFL losing their license. Gun control activists are not happy that we now have a common sense, or we soon will have a common sense, the real definition of what willful is. And yes, will that protect FFLs? Of course it will. It'll protect them from the abuses that we saw during the Biden administration.
Yeah, it sounds like they're upset about following the law instead of empowering pro-gun control, anti-Second Amendment right bureaucrats to go into these agencies and change the rules. But Matt, of course, this announcement is coming on the federal level as Democratic governors, including Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, who's only been in office for a couple of months now, working to limit Second Amendment freedoms on the state level. So do you think there's going to be a fight between the state and the federal government, especially given it seems like in Virginia, they're already violating Supreme Court precedent when it comes to carrying firearms outside of the home and other things that have already been upheld in terms of precedent at the Supreme Court?
One thing you and I talked about quite a bit is I think it's notable that Abigail Spanberger had proposed a bunch of changes to the Virginia gun-grabbing bills in hopes of making it less of an issue as voters went to the poll for her redistricting referendum, because she knew that if people saw just how drastically she was going to go, it would motivate gun owners to turn out to the polls. And so she tried to kind of hide the ball on that. But we also know the legislature largely ignored her proposed changes. And I think she's looking at a buzzsaw of legal challenges to everything she's trying to do, because as you said, she goes so much further than the law would allow, and there's so many precedents now that protect a lot of the fundamental Second Amendment rights that they're trying to chip away at. It is going to be a large battle, but I was at a gun store last weekend. I went to the range, and it was packed. People were out the doors because anytime there's one of these new threats to Second Amendment rights, everyone realizes they need to get out there while they can, get guns, get ammo, and make sure they're able to protect themselves.
Yeah, the Second Amendment Coalition is a very diverse one. So we're going to continue to watch this story. I'm sure there will be more in the future. Matt Whitlock, Cam Edwards, thank you so much for joining me. Great to see you both.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. All right, time now for this week's Bradley Report. There's no doubt that one of President Trump's major achievements this term is his complete overhaul of the southern border. Apprehensions have dropped from record highs under Joe Biden to historic lows. They're down 95% since early last year, but it's important to remember just how quickly things could flare up again. Take Laredo, Texas, for example, which has recently seen an unexpected uptick in illegal crossings. Joining us now from the border is Allie Bradley. Allie, what's happening down there? Why is there this new rush at the border?
Yeah, we're seeing this uptick in illegal crossings in the Laredo sector, and Border Patrol responding in a pretty big way here. They're sending at least 200 agents from both the northern and the southern border to this sector on a 30-day deployment. Now, our sources tell us that this sector is just lacking manpower, and it's seeing that pretty substantial increase in the foot traffic, and that substantial increase is showing up on the ground and in the data as well. 2,600 encounters have been logged in March and April. That's up more than 50% from the previous 2 months. When we look at April, it's up 86% over this time last year. Now, in a statement, CBP saying CBP sent additional personnel to Laredo to continue to secure our border. The sector is bordered entirely by river with no natural barriers to slow illegal crossings, which makes it a target when smuggling routes shift and evolve. Thanks to record low crossings, we have the manpower and flexibility to move agents quickly, concentrate resources, and take enforcement action where it matters most. Now, this as a sector is inevitably also dealing with gotaways, as you can't just walk in anymore. Sources telling us that across the border, Border Patrol is averaging around 48 gotaways a day. Those are people who have been seen on a camera or detected, but they're never actually caught. But when agents are finding them, the illegal immigrants are being smuggled in shocking ways and in very high temperatures right now. So take a look here. A 13-year-old locked inside a compartment of a semi-truck. That's a group that rushed in across the border and was apprehended. There were 22 people and 2 unaccompanied minors stuffed inside a sleeper cab of a truck. And then you had 17 illegal immigrants found hiding in a stash house waiting on their next move. And our sources do confirm that this detail does include part of their special operations teams, which does include BORTAC, which is essentially the SWAT arm of Border Patrol. Now, Katie, I also talked to a source today from Laredo. He said, hey, all this media coverage, all of this surge in manpower is working. It's quiet today. He said he hopes it stays this way, but we'll keep a finger on it and we'll keep our eyes and see if the uptick continues out there or not, Katie.
Absolutely. You're in the perfect place to do that. But, Al, you also have an exclusive worst of the worst list from DHS. They're still arresting people. Tell us about it.
still arresting who they consider the worst of the worst. And they provided us a list of 5 criminal illegal immigrants that we want to share with you here tonight. So let's start here first with Maria Guadalupe Arreola Rivera from Mexico. She's been convicted for 2 counts of aggravated arson and murder, intent to kill or injure in Illinois. Then we have Gerardo Diaz Tescarano from Mexico, convicted for felony death by vehicle in North Carolina. And then there's Ricardo Nava Daniel from Mexico, convicted for endangering the welfare of a child through sexual conduct in New Jersey. Trinidad Maninares Acosta from Mexico, convicted for sexual exploitation of a child in Colorado. And then Luis Casco Medina from El Salvador, convicted for sexual battery in Louisiana. Now, Acting Assistant Secretary Lauren Biss saying every day the nice men and women of ICE are putting their lives on the line to make America safe again. Just yesterday, they arrested murderers, pedophiles, arsonists, and sex criminals. Under President Trump and Secretary Mullen, criminal illegal aliens are not welcome in the United States. Now, those 5 individuals, it seemed like a long list this week, Katie, but 5 individuals that will be joining the nearly 31,000 of the worst already in DHS's database, and we'll have a new list for you next week, Katie.
All right, well, we look forward to it. They're still arresting people. Allie, stay safe out there. Thanks as always. See you soon. All right, well, there have been more than a dozen earthquakes near Area 51 since Trump promised to release the UFO files yesterday. Is that a coincidence? Our next guest is a renowned UFO researcher. We'll ask him about that and the scientists who are missing right after this. Welcome back to Katie Pavlich Tonight. Well, the socialists have co-opted May Day and are starting at midnight. They're calling for nationwide strikes. But recording on an iPhone is totally fine. Of course, they're hurting small businesses and students. That'll stick it to the billionaires. And some good news tonight, the U.S. economy is growing. GDP is now at 2%, and unemployment applications are at their lowest since 1969. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ both closed at record highs, marking their best month since 2020. Sounds like more winning to me. Well, in the span of 24 hours, there have been 17 earthquakes near Area 51. It started with a 4.4 magnitude quake just 2.5 miles underground. The area is normally not prone to earthquakes this shallow, and it's leading to theories of nuclear testing or even UFOs, because it all happened after President Trump said this.
Do you have an update on the UFO files and what we're going to be seeing?
Well, I think we're going to be releasing as much as we can in the near future. They want to find out about the UFOs and anything having to do with UFO or related material, and we're going to be releasing a lot of things that we have, and I think some of it's going to be very interesting.
Joining us now to respond, Dr. Stephen Greer, UFO researcher and retired physician. Great to see you, doctor. So are these earthquakes just a version of burning the files at an embassy when people got to get out?
Well, you know, the thing that lights up in my mind is that back in the 1990s, I briefed a man who worked and designed a security apparatus at some of the facilities out there, particularly the ones up near Groom Lake and Pahut Mesa. And he explained that on the top of those complexes underground were like bunker busting type bombs, but underneath them were thermonuclear devices, so that if anybody was getting close to those facilities, and by this, it could even be the legal government of the United States, they could collapse those facilities. Now, I don't know that that's what happened, but I know for a fact those security systems are out there. So that's one consideration. Now, it could just be a cluster of earthquakes, or they could be doing some legitimate underground testing out in that region.
Yeah, there are a lot of mountains out there, so earthquakes are not out of the question. But we just heard President Trump promising disclosure. Mm-hmm. What does disclosure actually mean in your mind?
Well, I founded the disclosure movement 25 years ago at the National Press Club event, where we had 20 top secret military and government people disclose their information. We're going to do another one on May 8th, coming up a week from Friday. And what we have found is that the government, meaning the constitutional government, was pretty much left out of the loop on this beginning in the late 1950s. And this is why when I spoke to President Trump's former national security advisor from his first term, they were never briefed on this. And I found this to be true all across government, both here and abroad. And yet the evidence is overwhelming that we're not alone, that there's a lot being kept secret. But the center of gravity of it is not in the government, it's in the corporations. My uncle spent his whole career with Northrop Grumman, so the large aerospace corporations are holding most of these secrets and run most of those facilities.
Why do you think they're holding the secrets? Is it because they just don't want us to freak out? Like, what's the purpose of keeping it all behind closed doors, whether it's the government or a corporation that's a private company?
Well, I think there are two main reasons. The first is that the technologies of how those operate was figured out in the mid 1950s. What are called electromagnetic-gravitic systems, or anti-gravity. The energy source is from the quantum vacuum or 0 point. We don't have time to go into that. And those being disclosed would eventually replace all oil, gas, coal in the world, and would also give us a completely cleaned environment, but also in poverty globally. And so there's been this debate for decades of when does this come out? When do we acknowledge these? Because there's no way you can acknowledge they're real, and that there's been a reverse engineering program that's gone on for over 70 or 80 years, and then say there's nothing that's come of that. I mean, the most brilliant scientific minds I've ever met work in covert programs related to this technology.
So we've been covering this story on the show and on the network. There's been this disappearance or deaths surrounding 12 or more scientists or people who work closely to government secrets, who had highly classified clearances, just walking into the desert, on a hike, disappearing with no trace. Based on what you've seen in the backgrounds of each of these different people on your screen, do you think that they're related in any way?
Well, they could be. Some of them may most certainly are. I think Mr. Sullivan and Amy Eskridge, who both were, one was going to come forward as a whistleblower and died, and the other one had technology related to what I just referred to, who was not suicidal, who was made to look like a suicide. Now, whether all of them are related to this, I don't know. General McCaskill from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base may have disappeared himself, because I've been working with a team of people with U.S. law enforcement handing off whistleblowers. We have 760 of them now, which have implicated certain people in criminal activities, child trafficking, human trafficking using advanced UAPs.
But have you heard from have you heard from Mr. McCaskill? Or
no, I haven't.
Any of the folks who are missing?
No, none of these people. But we did a film that came out, a documentary a couple of years ago called The Lost Century. And The Lost Century documents that over the decades, many people have been killed related to this issue, and particularly the technology part of it. Because, and frankly, I won't say which company, but there's a large government contractor who has a security officer that has been involved in targeted killings of certain people.
Well, we will follow up. We will be watching this for sure. You'll be back in the D.C. area for the 25th anniversary of this disclosure project next week. As you mentioned, we look forward to tuning in and learning more. Dr. Stephen Greer, thanks for joining us. Great to see you.
Thank you. Hope to see you.
Michael Jackson's former manager is here to talk about his new movie, and wait until you hear her story about Michael's relationship with Donald Trump. Well, the king of pop and top-selling artist of all time is being memorialized in a new movie that's breaking box office records. Michael depicts the life and legacy of Michael Jackson, but a huge part of Jackson's story is left out. According to movie producers, lawsuits and allegations against Jackson were cut due to legal reasons. Someone who was by Jackson's side through all of it is his former spokesperson and general manager, Ramon Bain, joins us now. Great to see you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So you saw the film. What was your reaction?
I saw the film, and I really think that Jafar just outdid himself. An excellent job in portraying Michael Jackson.
And Jafar, of course, is Michael Jackson's nephew.
Yes, Jermaine's son. And I'm telling you, you know, he captured his uncle so very well, and I was very, very proud to see that, because it exposes a new generation to who Michael Jackson was and the power that he showed on stage. So it was just fabulous.
How did he get that role exactly? Do you think?
I don't know.
Yeah, you thought it was a good that he played him.
Well, I think that perhaps because he looks a little like his uncle, and the producers probably saw the movements and felt that, hey, we might as well, you know, capture Michael Jackson through a family member, and I assume that's how he was chosen. And I'm sure that he had to audition for it, And I thought that he did an excellent job.
A lot of people are watching it, and they seem to like it. Michael Jackson, of course, one of the most famous pop stars in history.
Yes.
Of course, though, you said that you want to introduce Michael to new generations. Michael Jackson was not without controversy. In 2005, he had a trial where he faced child molestation charges.
And he was acquitted.
Correct. And later he was acquitted. But you stood by his side the entire time.
I did.
And why is that?
Because I felt that Michael Jackson was innocent. And he was a good person, talented, very resolved, very strong. And people looked at Michael a lot as being weak, but he wasn't. The more people attacked him, the more they demeaned, diminished, defamed, it made him stronger. And that's what he said to me a lot. I said, Mr. Jackson, does it bother you the way you are portrayed sometimes? He said, no, Ramon, it makes me stronger. And so that's what I want people to know about him. And hopefully, you know, as they read more and they study more about him, they will see that he was spiritually strong and his resolve was very strong.
Well, this film is doing very well, and more people, I'm sure, will watch it. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, is also a big fan. He offered financial support to Michael Jackson when he needed it, so he was a big fan as well. Maybe he'll watch it.
Well, he was a good friend.
Yes, exactly. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Do you have something else to say about that real quickly?
Well, no, I think that President Trump, Snoop, Steve Harvey, Beyonce, Babyface, so many of them supported him at a time that he needed it. We don't need people to support us if we're doing well. That's
true.
nice.
Yes.
But when people are down on us, we need the support.
Exactly. Well, great to see you. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That does it for us. Jesse, take it away. Have a great show.
Thank you. Great show. Let's get started.